No one was prepared for the storm that erupted the moment whispers began trickling out of Riyadh's most guarded palace hallways. Whispers that Prince William's seemingly elegant, diplomatic, perfectly staged luxury dinner with the Saudi royal family may not have ended with polite farewells and polished speeches, but with something far more tantalizing, far more secretive, and, according to insiders who absolutely refused to put their names on record, far more explosive and unreported gift exchange that was allegedly scrubbed from every official document, photo release, palace statement. An itinerary sheet before dawn even touched the tiles of Kensington Palace. And the moment that rumor hit the bloodstream of royal gossip circles, it didn't just raise eyebrows, it set off alarms louder than the palace's own emergency protocols. Because the question wasn't what Prince William received, it was why it needed to be hidden. From the very beginning, this dinner had already carried the weight of potential drama. William wasn't in Saudi Arabia as a symbolic ribbon-cutting prince this time. No, this was a deliberate, meticulously calculated diplomatic mission. A mission shaped by whispers of a shifting global hierarchy and a quiet urgency surrounding Britain's future alliances. The world saw the photos, William smiling, the crown prince's hand on his shoulder, a long table glittering with gold decor, traditional delicacies, and the kind of ceremonial hospitality reserved only for individuals considered powerful enough to shift the strategic direction of an entire region. But what the world didn't see, what they weren't supposed to see, was what happened after the press was escorted out, after the photographers disappeared, and after the palace staff gently closed the gilded doors behind them. That's the moment insiders say the atmosphere changed from lavish diplomacy to something more intimate, more symbolic, and far more controversial. Allegedly, the tone shifted the moment the crown prince signaled for the outer guards to step back. It was a gesture so subtle that only those who understood Saudi royal protocol would have caught its significance. Removing the guards didn't just create privacy, it created intent. And according to whispers that have been circulating like wildfire, that intent materialized into an exchange so delicate, so politically symbolic, and so deeply personal that neither Kensington Palace nor the Saudi royal court wanted it documented. One insider claims that William looked visibly taken aback. Another says there was a brief moment where the air itself felt heavier. And a third insists they saw William pausing, weighing something in his mind before accepting what was placed before him. Of course, no one agrees on what the mysterious object was. Some say it was a rare artifact, something tied to pre-Islamic Arabian history, so rare, in fact, that its ownership alone could ignite debates among historians. Others swear it was something more modern, possibly a symbolic heirloom intended to forge a deeper bond between future kings. And then there are the wild theories, the ones that only emerge at 2 a.m. On encrypted group chats, a royal emblem, a confidential document, a personalized item meant only for William, or even a diplomatic token that hinted at a behind-the-scenes alliance no one is supposed to speculate about. But what sets this rumor apart, what makes it different from the usual chatter surrounding royal trips, is the eerie silence from both sides. Not a denial, not a playful dismissal, not even a politely vague "we do not comment on private exchanges," just silence. Heavy, calculated silence. And silence, especially from a palace notorious for clarifying absolutely everything, from tiara choices to flower selections, feels louder than any press statement. The moment William returned to London, his expression struck several reporters as different. Not distressed, not excited, but contemplative. It wasn't the look of a man returning from a routine diplomatic dinner, it was the look of someone who had been handed something they weren't fully prepared to receive. Something meaningful, something complicated, and something that, for reasons yet unknown, needed to be kept off the books. And this is where the story gets even more deliciously tangled. Because while palace officials tried to mask every trace of the alleged exchange, they failed to hide the one thing they could never control: the energy of those who witnessed the atmosphere shift around William afterwards. Staff members who saw him during his first 48 hours back at Kensington reported a kind of private focus, a seriousness in his movements, a tendency to speak more quietly, more intentionally, more deliberately, as though he was calculating the ripple effects of something only he and a tiny handful of people knew about. In fact, one aide told a London journalist under absolute anonymity that William was unusually reflective, pacing near the window of his private office with a small leather-bound notebook in hand, a habit he reserves for moments of high internal conflict or major decisions. According to this insider, William wasn't distressed. He wasn't shaken. He was absorbing. Absorbing what? Absorbing why something given to him needed to remain hidden. Absorbing what accepting it might imply for his future role. Absorbing considering the political, cultural, and personal implications of a secret gesture from a future king, because one thing is clear, the Saudi royal family does not perform symbolic exchanges lightly. Every gesture is layered, every object carries legacy, and every unreported gift has a purpose, which leads to the most tantalizing question of all. The question fueling every royal podcast, every gossip forum, every late-night political debate, and every encrypted message sent between royal insiders who know they should not be talking but absolutely cannot help themselves. Because the moment that possibility emerges, the entire situation becomes far more complex than just a secret gift. Suddenly, we're talking about strategy, leverage, mutual acknowledgement, or even a subtle declaration of trust or expectation between future monarchs. And William's reaction? Perfectly controlled, perfectly unreadable, perfectly royal. Yet everyone who saw him after that dinner agrees on one thing: something changed, something shifted, something began. And that's why this rumor refuses to die, because the dinner was public but the aftermath was private. And private moments around power are where the most dangerous stories are born. Prince William's return to London became the thunderclap that sent ripples through every private dining room in Westminster, every elite WhatsApp circle of political consultants, and every whisper-laden hallway of Kensington Palace. Because the alleged unreported gift exchange wasn't just a rumor now, it had become a force, an invisible weight shaping conversations, changing tones, tightening security around meetings, and raising one terrifyingly irresistible question among those bold enough to speak it aloud: what if the gift wasn't merely symbolic but strategic? The truth is, palace aides began acting differently almost immediately. There were sudden schedule reshuffles, meetings that were previously routine now became internal only, and the language surrounding William's Saudi trip shifted from glowing diplomatic reviews to vague phrases like productive exchange, meaningful dialogue, and forward-looking outcomes. Words that mean everything and nothing. Words that hover in the air like perfume and disappear just as quickly, leaving behind speculation thick enough to carve with a knife. And then came the most intriguing detail of all. A source inside Kensington, someone who has never been dramatic a day in their life, according to their colleagues, claimed they saw William spending unusually long periods alone in the room where he stores diplomatic gifts. Except this time, no new. Gifts were officially logged. It wasn't the silence that made this suspicious. It was the habit. William is known for cataloging diplomatic items meticulously. Every trinket, every artwork, every cultural token gets recorded. It's a system learned from the late Queen herself. But this time, no entries, no staff notes, no updates to the diplomatic log. That room became his private sanctum, a place where he lingered far longer than usual, as though contemplating something that didn't belong to the public record. Insiders described it with the kind of careful phrasing that only emerges when people know they are treading on dangerous ground. He was thoughtful. Another said it wasn't worry, it was wait. A third whispered, I've only seen that expression on him after major decisions, not minor gestures. And all of them pointed back to one night, one dinner, one moment in Riyadh that had somehow created a tremor beneath the normally unshakable floors of the royal institution. The Crown Prince's gesture, whatever it was, didn't just pierce protocol. It pierced William's composure. Whispers suggest that the gift might have held meaning beyond the object itself. Something about legacy, something about shared futures, something about acknowledgement. The Saudi royal family, after all, is not in the business of meaningless gestures. They give with intention. They signal with subtlety sharper than steel. And they are masters of symbolic diplomacy, a kind of diplomacy that is not written down but remembered, not photographed but felt. It was during a closed-door meeting 3 days after his return that the first true sign of tension emerged. William reportedly paused mid-sentence, something he almost never does, after a senior advisor referenced the Middle East geopolitical landscape. He wasn't shaken, he was calculating, measuring, filtering every word through a new lens, a lens he did not have before that dinner. One attendee later confessed privately it was like watching someone carry a secret without wanting to show they're carrying it. Rumors began bubbling that a set of extremely private, extremely confidential briefings had been arranged for William, briefings usually reserved for the sovereign or the foreign secretary. The topics? Not disclosed. The timing? Suspiciously aligned with his return. And then there was the most eyebrow-raising detail. William personally requested additional historical context about the House of Saud, particularly surrounding symbolic traditions and royal-to-royal exchanges. That request alone set off a subtle alarm across departments. William is thorough, yes, but he doesn't usually make targeted research demands unless something sparked his curiosity or his concern. Meanwhile, behind palace gates and high security offices, quieter stirrings were happening. Communications teams began operating under precision messaging, a strategy used only when rumors threaten to grip too tightly. It's designed not to deny, not to confirm, but to redirect. And redirect they did toward William's environmental initiatives, his upcoming engagements, his growing soft power influence. Everything except the one thing no one publicly dared to mention, the possibility that a private exchange with a future king might have handed him something with the potential to shift diplomatic language for years to come. But the public? Oh, the public felt something was off. Not in the obvious ways, not through headlines or polls, but through energy, through tone, through the barely concealed fascination in how William carried himself at his next appearance. Observers noted an unmistakable depth in his expression, the kind of subtle intensity that never announces itself but radiates through stillness. William had always carried responsibility, but now he carried something else, something personal, something unscripted, and those closest to him noticed too. One aide whispered that William's conversations became more layered, more reflective, as though every topic, from climate change to Commonwealth relations, now existed within a larger, unseen framework. Another said he had taken to writing more frequently in his personal notebook, not pages at a time, lines, phrases, thoughts that struck him with sudden weight. And the most compelling detail? He never left that notebook unattended, even briefly. Slowly, quietly, a theory began to take shape among those brave enough to speculate. Perhaps the gift was not an object, but an invitation, a gesture from one future monarch to another, a signal that their respective eras might be intertwined in ways the world had not yet realized. That theory grew louder when William's staff noticed a shift in how he spoke about long-term partnerships, not just economic ties or environmental collaboration, but deeper, more cultural bridges, more human connections, as though something had stirred him into imagining a world in which Britain's future wasn't about reclaiming old influence, but redefining new alliances. That's when gossip reached its fever pitch. Not because the details were confirmed, they weren't. Not because the palace acknowledged the exchange, they didn't. But because of the one thing that no PR strategy, no diplomatic silence, no careful palace wording could hide, William had changed. His silence spoke. His posture spoke. His eyes, steady, thoughtful, charged with some unspoken knowledge, spoke. People in royal circles describe a peculiar truth. Some objects, some gestures, some exchanges are not meant to be displayed. They are meant to be carried. And William, according to everyone who has watched him since his Saudi evening, is carrying something indeed. Something that didn't come from Britain. Something never photographed. Something never logged. Something given. And that is why this story refuses to die. Because the dinner ended publicly, but privately, something began. Something quiet. Something powerful, something that is now shaping William in ways no one can fully articulate, but everyone can feel. And the most haunting whisper of all, the object may have been hidden, but its impact is already in motion.